A lot of people kind of assume that grief only comes with loss. But can you explain the different types of losses that are associated with grief?
Yes, traditionally, right, when we think of the word grief, we think of loss of a loved one, but grief essentially just means loss. It could be loss of childhood, like when you start to grow up and you have to say goodbye to childhood. There's a loss associated with that. There's a loss when you leave home for college. There's a loss of, your childhood home is no longer your daily home. Loss is anything where
Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Make Today Well Lived, the podcast. I'm Allie Norman Franks, Beverly Hills High School wellness counselor and the founder of the NormanAid Wellness Center. 2 of our NormanAid peer counselors, Simone and Nick, will be interviewing our special guest. Danielle Fagan-Brooks is a marriage and family therapist. She'll be talking about the different types of grief and tools to help cope with loss.
It's really nice to meet you. My name is Nick Kay. I'm a peer counselor at Beverly. I'm a senior. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm so glad that you guys are doing this. It's so important during this time for us to just constantly make adjustments and be flexible in terms of connecting with others and, providing support. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. Gosh, I think I've been at this clinical skill set now for almost 20 years, which sounds strange to say out loud, almost 2 decades. I've worked in a variety of different settings, from public schools to private schools to clinics and inpatient and outpatient programs. But I've also been in private practice now for about the last 15 years. And my practice has been in the Beverly Hills area, so that I'm really familiar with your school and teachers and the dynamics and such. So I get an opportunity to work probably about 50% of my time with the high school age students, which I love. And the rest of my time I spend working with kids and families and adults and couples, which is fun to just kind of mix it up and get different opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome that you get to cater to all different types of people and all the different ages. How has your job changed since the pandemic?
Oof, right? It's like almost saying to you guys, how has your life changed since the pandemic?
Yeah.
It's something incredibly unique because with all the different ages I work with people with different backgrounds, different family makeups, different histories, and different school settings and different life circumstances. But it's the first time in 20 years where every client is going through the same thing. Every client can essentially relate to one another regardless of what their life circumstances are. So all of my hours are being spent essentially talking in some degree about the same topic, but also as a clinician, I'm also going through it. So it's very different than just kind of showing up and really being present for somebody else. I have to stay very mindful of my self-care and like addressing all of my own stuff in regards to the pandemic and all the changes, because that's what my clients are talking about all the time. So it's been a universal shift to clinically talk about the same thing in every session, whether I have a 6-year-old or a 69-year-old. It's the same topic. So it's been very equally fascinating and devastating to have that be the case.
It's a time where people of all different ages can go through, or it's not a choice, but I mean, we're all going through the same thing and the same emotions. A lot of people kind of assume that grief only comes with loss. But can you explain the different types of losses that are associated with grief?
Yeah, I think that, yes, traditionally, right, when we think of the word grief, we think of loss of a loved one, but, grief essentially just means loss. And loss comes in all different forms. It could be loss of a marriage. It could be loss of a job. It could be loss of childhood. Like when you start to grow up and you have to say goodbye to childhood, there's a loss associated with that. There's a loss when you leave home for college. There's a loss of, your childhood home is no longer your daily home. Loss is anything where we have to say goodbye to something, or we were expecting something and it no longer is, right? Which I'm sure you guys as seniors, I can only begin to imagine how relatable that is for you. And, we talk about the concept of like a cherished dream, right? So cherished is something that you hold in your mind and hold it so tight, it's so personal, and you can kind of play out what it's going to look like. So, what are some things that you guys planned on senior year that are now losses for you?
For me personally, the whole senior year itself, I actually didn't take a summer break last year so I could have a senior year. So I had to work a little extra, and then it's all online. So it's a big loss. We miss things like homecoming and a lot of things that we looked up to and watched the seniors do last year.
Right.
So it's a huge loss, and it's still, even now, we're not sure of what's going to happen. So it's not like we can start, closing this chapter and being like, okay, well, senior year is over, because there are still a few more months. But it's nerve-wracking not to know for sure what we are going to be able to do and what we're not.
Well, that anticipation of, is something else going to become a loss, or am I actually going to get to experience it? So not only do you have to try to grieve and cope and deal with all the losses you've already experienced, but you have to wonder, well, that thing coming ahead, is that going to be added to my list of losses? Or is it going to be like, yes, I got to do it, right? So there's also this angst that a lot of people can feel, which is, well, which way is this going to go? And then you start to, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, you start to feel really defeated of like, what's the point of feeling hopeful? Because then I'm just going to set myself up for disappointment. Do you guys, what is it like how do you guys manage that? Do you stay hopeful? Do you just stay one day at a time? Like, how do you manage like what's coming up and wondering what's going to happen?
Said it perfectly. I think that ever since we were freshmen, we like looked up to like senior year and like all the fun stuff that like goes along with that. Prom, graduation, senior night. So like coming into senior year, like I didn't think that like we were actually like gonna be able to miss all of that. I just thought it'd be like first semester online, and seeing how like our senior year is like slowly just like not as we thought it would be. It's kind of like disappointing, but I know that it's like not administration's fault or not like our fault. So we can't like do much about it. We just have to like go with it and just like hope for the best, or hope that something good will like come up this year and we can learn from it.
Yeah, I think, Simone, one of the things you mentioned is like what's out of your hands, right? That this sense of powerlessness and helplessness about such important aspects of your life is really hard to, what do you do with that, right? What do you do with where you're not the one making the decisions? You don't get to decide things, right? How do you cope with that and manage it? It's really, really challenging. And that's a big theme that I see in my practice right now with all ages, which is all of these decisions that are out of their hands and trying to find the balance of course, this makes sense. Of course, this is appropriate. Of course, we can't do this. But then also, how do you kind of stay hopeful for things that are ahead? And it's a lot, as a parent, and then also as a clinician and working with people your age, I feel like life right now is about a lot of no's. No, I'm so sorry you can't do that. No, I'm so sorry that your test, isn't open notes. Or no, I'm so sorry that you can't go into your friend in that way. No, I'm so sorry that you can't come back on campus, for whatever it might be. I feel like it's constant no's. I mean, do you guys feel like your life right now is a lot of no's, or you feel like you're getting used to it? Are you accepting it? Like, what is that like for you guys?
I think the getting used to it part is a big aspect in my life right now. I mean, growing up, whenever you got nervous about something, people were like, well, the worst they can say is no. And so nowadays it's like there's way more no's and a lot less yeses. And with you asked us about how we're going forward and looking forward and just staying one day at a time. And I feel like now that we've gotten to, almost a year of being online for school, it has kind of gotten like each day is the same and it's hard to keep going, but putting as much potential into each individual day as possible. That's what's helped me personally, keep going. And then also things further in the future. So as a senior, like it's hard for me to look forward to things like graduation or prom because those are huge unknowns that we don't have control of. But I'm able to look at things like, my freshman year at college and further away that I know still have a possibility of happening. So personally, that's how I'm trying to get through each day.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because essentially what you're saying is we can get stuck in feeling the heaviness of the daily loss. Like I'm online again. Here I go again, the same day, I'm online again, in my same room, looking at my same four walls with the same people in my home, expecting the same thing that my teachers are going to say. The same people will have their camera on or their camera off. It's the same thing again. So the heaviness of just the day-to-day, monotony, kind of Groundhog's Day for sure, just even coping with that. And then you're right, you guys have, what's coming ahead in the near future. Do you think about it? Do you not think about it? Do you, what is your level of loss or grief around the anticipation of that, right? And then you've got a really excellent tool that you just provided, which is what about how do you bring in the future? And how do you let the future bring a sense of comfort to help you through the day-to-day heaviness, through the anticipation of like, am I going to have prom? Am I not going to have prom? Kind of looking through, well, I know like freshman and sophomore year of college, I am going to be living with people separate from my family. I'm going to be exploring new things. I'm going to be meeting new people. So kind of keeping that as a touch point to kind of keep us going, I think helps for sure. And one of the things I've seen, I'd love to hear from you guys based on your friends. Some people are really good at that. They're really good at keeping in their mind sight that future. And then others are just so consumed with the heaviness of the day, like the loss of the day they're in. Like, I can't stand one more class on Zoom and the heaviness of that. So they can't even see like whether prom's going to happen or not, right? They're just so bogged down by that. Are you guys seeing kind of a variation with like your friends and your peers of how they feel that?
100%. With me personally, I've struggled with like mental health issues my entire life. So it was a really big thing for me when I was younger. It was hard for me to use the future as incentive for the present. So
well said.
Like look forward because it was so hard in my day-to-day life. But over time, that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned, that in a healthy way, you can use the future and things you're looking forward to help keep yourself motivated each day that comes. But I do have friends that it was really hard for them even to think about applying to colleges because they're stuck here and doing this. And it's like so hard to get through each day and each class. And it's hard to look forward and think of positive things that could be happening. So I definitely see both sides of the scale.
Yeah, because we feel lost physically and emotionally, right? So loss and grief is really felt in those two ways. And when we deal with strong feelings, but we also, our body is kind of caught up in it, right? So with grief, we can feel, low motivation, low energy, difficulty sleeping, appetite kind of all over the place. We can then feel lonely, isolated, helpless, powerless, worried, anxious, you name it. And so I can't imagine what it's like for you guys to try to show up at every class, get your schoolwork done, try to relate to your peers, keep things intact within your home and your family, but then also cope with all of the physical and emotional, underpinnings of grief and loss. I feel like right now your year in particular is taking such a massive hit to their self. And talking about that future and using the future as an incentive, you said it so well for the day that you're in. Oh my goodness, the resilience that you guys are building You know, like later on in life, you're going to go through something really hard and you're going to be able to look back and say, but I did that. I can do this. I totally can get through my 4 finals in 2 days at college because I did that. You know, you have a reference point. So the resiliency that you're building is so impressive. And, you know, I think one of the most important ways to help ourselves through grief and loss is to find a really strong internal voice, right? So how do I get through this Zoom class? I'm just going to say to myself, do your best, focus the best that you can. It is what it is. You can handle it. Whatever your self-talk is, in this isolation and this loneliness, we're given this incredible, painful, but incredible opportunity to develop that inner voice. And if we get a nice, strong inner voice, that goes with us into the future. That goes with us into when we're struggling in a moment with our roommate. We can kind of talk ourselves through it maybe in a better way than we could have before, because our voice inside is so much stronger, you know, so we get that opportunity for that. But man, this is not a fun way to build it.
Yeah, but then again, you take the positives and say, hey, maybe I can get this out of this experience, and it makes it a little bit better. You briefly talked about what comes with grief and loss and the emotions and the feelings. Can you discuss the different stages of grief and how they apply to the different types of losses?
Yes. So there is a psychological acronym that we use. It's called DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. And they are the stages of grief. So the first D stands for kind of disbelief, that shock. Like think back to when school got closed and you were sent home. It was kind of like, wait, what's happening? Like 2 or 3 weeks of this? Okay, this is a little surprising. And then the continual shock of, oh, now that's not happening. Okay, wait, now that's not happening. Wait, I can't believe this is happening. Like there's this shock, right, factor and surprise. That's the first stage. The second stage is an A for anger, which is, why is this happening? This is so unfair. I can't stand this. This is so upsetting. Like just the anger and the frustration with the loss that you experience. And then the next letter is a B for bargaining. And a lot of people can relate to this one. Well, if I just do this, then this part could get better. Or if I would have done that, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. And maybe if I would have listened in this way, then I could have changed this outcome. So it's a lot of kind of trying to after negotiate what's already happened, because our brain is really trying to wrap our head around what happened and what created that loss and grief. Because if we can master it, if we can figure out the negotiation around it, then we can prevent it from happening in the future. So it's our brain's way of trying to kind of reconcile, to try to process through the concept of if and then, right? So that's another stage of grief. And then the fourth letter, the D, is for depression, when you just feel like, oh, you just feel the weight and the heaviness of the loss and the grief. And you just feel it in your bones, and it just aches and it just hurts, and it's no energy and sadness and hopelessness and powerlessness. And then the last A is for acceptance. Kind of a bit about what the two of you have talked about, which is, we can't do anything about this. It is what it is. What can I look forward to my future? How can I make today the best that I can make it? Where do I have power? Where do I have a say? And how do I accept this loss, but also kind of cope with it and manage it and kind of move my life forward? And one of the misconceptions about DABDA is people believe, because it's called stages of grief, it's like, oh, you go through disbelief, and then you go to anger, and then you go to bargaining, and then you go to depression, and then you go to acceptance. You just kind of work yourself through it, and you're good to go. You can actually go through those 5 in the span of 10 minutes. You can go from disbelief to anger to bargaining, back to disbelief, then to a little bit of depression, and then some acceptance, and then back to anger. Like, you can kind of move through those. But if you look over the course of several months, depending on what the loss and the grief is, you eventually kind of see you really are working overall through those stages, but they can kind of rapid cycle, which is why dealing with grief is so overwhelming, because the stages of grief, you know, aren't sequential. And so it's really emotionally can feel like you're spinning, because you go through so much kind of all at once. I don't know if any of those stages of grief you guys can relate to or feel like you're in right now. for either of you?
I think throughout senior year, like I've been through all of those, anger, like depression for a little bit here and there. But now I think I'm at the point of like acceptance because like, as I've said, like it's really much like out of our control. So anything I can do, I can't do anything to change it. So I think I'm just at the point of like acceptance now, and I'm like hopeful for something.
Mhm.
If it's like a smaller prom, or if it's like a in-person graduation, whatever it might be, like I'm just at the point where I'm accepting it, and like I'm just hopeful for something to come out of it that will help us learn, or will be just a good thing to come out of senior year, if that like makes any sense.
Of course it does. Absolutely. I think one of the things you're talking about, which is learning, and I feel like in this stage of grief and loss with the pandemic, is we're learning the concept of patience, flexibility, and kind of going with the flow and making the best of it, right? Like I might have imagined my cherished dream of like the prom looking in this way, and okay, it might not look that way. It might look this way or this way or this way or this way. And okay, like I can work with that, right? That acceptance of it's not going to look exactly the way that I thought, but that's when you're at the stage of acceptance with grief of like, okay, accept it's not going to look that way. I've already gone through all the other stages to kind of get to that point of that's how it's going to look. But I can work with that, right? I can adjust that. I can make the best of that. And I think that one of the things that comes up a lot is, and I'm curious if your parents are using this tactic, or counselors at school or teachers, there's such an emphasis right now on gratitude, right? Like, let's be grateful. We're so grateful we're in homes. We don't have to worry about food coming. We have access to excellent teachers and support, right? That, you know, a lot of parents, one of the ways that I've seen at least them trying to help their kids through this stage of grief is to really over focus on be grateful, be grateful, be grateful. And I've seen that have, to be quite honest, not a super positive impact on people in a stage of loss and grief. And I'm wondering for you guys, if you've had that experience where everyone's like, let's be grateful and let's be hopeful and let's just be thankful, and maybe you feel different about that now, like, because it's been a year, but has that been something that people are using as a tool with you guys to focus on gratitude?
So in my case, I can even just talk about myself trying to do that, because I think a really big issue I'm having right now is trying to be grateful and understanding how lucky I am to be in my position. Mm-hmm. There's other people dealing with far, far, far worse. But I also think being aware of that is really good, but it's also harming my ability to, you know, understand that my problems do deserve time as well to, you know, me to work on them. So I'm glad that I'm aware and I'm able to be grateful of everything that I have, but I think it's also pushing on to me not giving myself the time to work on my issues, the things that I'm going through, because I know that a lot of people are going through a lot worse. So I would rather try and help those situations.
So I think, you know, where we can maybe make sense of gratitude, and I think you just alluded to it, which is essentially how do we hold it in our mind, right? Like maybe in certain moments where it's like, oh, this Zoom class, like I can't even focus. Okay, but I'm really grateful that I have internet and that I have access to excellent teachers. And we know 17 million kids right now don't know when their next meal is coming, right? We can kind of hold that. I think perspective, the way I think about perspective in life in general, but definitely during loss and grief and challenging times, I pick, you know, it's like loss and grief, you feel like your toes are over the edge, right? And I feel like perspective is your harness. Like just as you're about to tip all the way over, it can kind of pull you back, right? Because you just remember that it's, you know, that we are so incredibly lucky. And how do we then, and you just talked about another really important, powerful tool that I talk about with my clients, how do you give back in a certain way? So a lot of how we heal through loss and grief is when we are at more of a stage of acceptance, we start to show up for others who aren't, right? How do we then give back to others who are in a different stage of it or struggling with it? But I am wondering, because this is coming up a lot clinically, where it can feel really deregulating when you're really feeling the loss, like you're in the sadness of the loss or the anger of the loss. And someone's like, well, let's just be grateful. I mean, we're so lucky that, you know, we don't have to worry about food, or we don't have to worry about a home with heat, while you're in the middle of crying about, you know, prom or no senior day, or worried about what if college application the process becomes more difficult, right? And you're feeling the heaviness of your own grief and loss, and someone's like, well, let's be grateful. We're so lucky. I don't know if you guys have had that experience, but I have found that's something that I'm working on constantly with the parents in my practice. Normally when I work with adolescents and teens your age, they really don't want their parents involved in their therapy very much. Hallelujah, I agree. But in this, you asked me, like, how has my work been different? A lot of my teen clients are like, can you call my mom? Can you talk to my dad? Can you help them understand this? It's been complete. Normally they're like, please don't call my mom. Please don't talk to my dad. Now they're asking, can you please explain this? That I get it, we're really lucky and so incredibly fortunate, but can they please not say it in the moment where I'm feeling that pit of my own kind of despair and loss? It feels so invalidating. So that is something I've seen come up a lot, which is parents are feeling their own anxiety, their own sadness, their own grief, and overwhelmed that when their child goes into it, the parents are jumping to, okay, but let's just be grateful, and we are so lucky. And it really can feel incredibly invalidating and minimizing. And that's something I've seen come up a lot that I've been trying to help parents with. I don't know if you guys can relate to that or have friends who have that experience, but that's been a really big one.
It's very interesting that you talk about how a lot of teenagers have been coming to you and asking you to actually talk to their parents. And I think that's a direct, cause of this pandemic and all of us being in a house together for so long. And, before this, when kids could hang out with their friends more or talk to others more, now we don't really have that option. So you're with your family all the time. So they actually want their parents to understand what they're going through and hear it right from you or whoever they're working with. And I think this conversation is really important, not only for dealing with, the loss and grief we're going through right now, but also everything that's maybe happened in someone's life before the pandemic, that being home all this time has given them the time to finally grieve and go through some of those emotions that maybe they hadn't before because they were busy with their day-to-day lives and their jobs and the busy normal life that we usually have. So all this extra time we have now, I think it's really important to talk about grief and loss and how to work with it, because a lot of people are going through it more than they might have expected to or even knew they had to before the beginning of this pandemic.
You are so incredibly insightful. I have to wonder if you applied for a major in psychology, or you should shift it to that, because you're like right on the money here. I think you talked about something incredibly important. During this quiet, during this low level of distractibility, where does our mind go? And you're right. A lot of people are going back to things they experienced, whether it's within their family, friendships, past relationships, and are really diving deep into that self-reflection, which I believe is such a gift, but is also incredibly overwhelming. And I've seen a lot of people, like I'll be talking to like a 16-year-old and, she'll say, I just got a text from this person that I had a falling out with in 7th grade, like wanting to connect and have a conversation. I've seen that and heard that now a lot, of people reaching out to others and kind of trying to make amends or, restart a friendship or a connection. I think it's also been a tricky time with so much isolation and loneliness that, obviously technology, which is a whole other conversation of the role that technology plays in trying to build those connections and how it can become a distraction from exactly what you're talking about, which is how do we use this time to heal or really settle in to learn, which I think is the most important thing in life, learning how to tolerate incredibly uncomfortable feelings, because you're going to have uncomfortable feelings every day for the rest of your life. And those who learn how to tolerate them and feel them and move through them have more successful relationships and friendships and confidence and self-esteem. And so this time period of doing that deep dive into your own self, yeah, opens up a completely different aspect of loss and grief. Because normally with loss and grief, you don't really do that. But with all this space, you know, so how are people using it, or are people distracting themselves and filling it with technology and shows? And I kind of think in the beginning people did. I don't know about you guys, like they're rolling through their Netflix, they're rolling through their Amazon, and now they're kind of like, oh yeah, I don't want to watch anything, like nothing really interests me. And now they're sitting, and you know, boredom is the opportunity for deep thought. It really is.
My mom grew up, and I grew up with my mom telling me her dad would tell her there's no such thing as boredom, because as a kid, you go to your parents and say, I'm bored, you know, what do I want to do? He's always like, you can read a book, you can go do something. Boredom, that free time gives you the chance to do something else. And I finished my questions, and I just want to say thank you so much. I loved having this conversation with you. I'm going to pass it to Simone now, but I do agree with you when you say, you know, boredom gives you the opportunity to do so many other things. And specifically in my case, in the beginning of this pandemic, I mean, I went through all the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, and I'm getting to the point where going through all these, and I've watched everything I have. So I'm at this stop point where I'm like, okay, let's do something productive with my time and trying to watch more movies or watch more TV shows. And it's hard to get to the other side of that. But with, you know, all these great ways to work on it, I'm looking forward to it. So thank you again.
My name's Simone. I'm also a senior and a peer counselor. And so as Nick said, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you. Just to get in, what support or tools do you find to be most helpful in managing grief and loss?
So it's very personal, but I'm going to apply it specifically to the pandemic, just because I think it's different than when we're grieving the loss of a loved one. So we're talking about grieving the loss of life as we knew it, right? Grieving the loss of our cherished dreams and stuff. Okay. So one is to allow yourself to feel how you feel. It's really giving yourself an opportunity to just feel sadness, feel frustration, feel anger, and start to name it. To start to say to yourself, I feel frustrated, I feel upset, I feel disappointed. What we tend to do in life is distract ourselves away from even identifying how we feel. So I think the number one tool is you got to kind of name it to tame it, essentially. So being able to say to yourself, right, like, I feel upset, I feel disappointed, I feel frustrated, I feel numb, whatever it might be. I think that has to exist before you can open the door to any other tools, right? Because otherwise you don't even know what you're coping with. So from there, you know, I think one of the most important things right now is having a balance between venting and ranting about the frustrations and the disappointments and the losses and the pain and all of that, and then going through that and doing that, and then saying to yourself, okay, now what? Then saying to yourself, you know, what is a productive emotional step that I can take? I can reach out to a friend and see how they're feeling, right? I can pay it forward in that way. I can take an action step to then check in on somebody else. I can do some journaling, but not just the venting, ranting, kind of throw up journaling style, but writing all of that and then saying, how do I grow from this? How do I understand myself better? What can I look forward to in the future? So balancing out. We tend to get sometimes really heavy on the let me get it all off my chest, which is great. But then there's no kind of framework or boundary to it. And we want to build the skill of the toleration. Okay, so how do I now tolerate with all those feelings? I'm going to build my inner voice. Okay, I'm going to do the best that I can today. It's kind of like a mantra, right? So, you know, in our house, we kind of say, it is what it is. How do you make the best of it? Right? So we kind of are accepting this sucks with, okay, now how do we cope? How do we manage? What is this? Right? So some other coping tools that are really, really helpful is making sure you know who is a good person to talk to. Sometimes we can get into a pattern of going to the same person that maybe we don't feel heard by, or maybe we don't feel understood by, but why do we keep going back to that same person? So being able to identify who are people that are productive and helpful, whether it's school counseling, whether it's peer counselors, whether it's a best friend, whether it's a cousin, whether it's an aunt, go to the person who can connect with you, listen, hear, support, understand, and then, and notice how it's and then, help you with what's next. And what happens, and one of the things I'm working with parents a lot right now, is parents are really jumping in for, okay, well, I know that that really sucks being on Zoom, but, just, focus the best that you can, or just be grateful you have your computer, or there's such a rush to make it okay, right? So learning, part of the tools are learning how to just feel how you feel and really get them out, and then take a productive kind of action step and game plan.
I do agree with you 100% when you talk about balancing, because I think that that's also like the most important thing. I've actually started to journal every day since like the beginning of the year. Like I told myself like I'm going to do that every day, because that's going to be my way to like just like let go. And at the end of the night before I'm going to go to bed, just like write a few things down about my day. And I think that's really important. Or like talking and like knowing who like your true and real friends are. I think quarantine has taught a lot of us that. Just like knowing who reaches out and who says like, hey, how you doing? Like just a simple text like that, I think can like help someone a lot. So I do agree. I do agree with you on that.
And I think it's important to get creative. After you get the venting off, right? And we say like the action step or the now what, get creative. A part of healing and a part of in that stage of acceptance is, how do you create hope? What is in your control? Can you make your own senior t-shirts? Can you have your own senior day that is safe? And who do you invite? And how do you do that? Can you, create, I've had a lot of people do time capsules, with their friends. I've had people, create, shared journals online, so that they're relatable. I mean, how do you get creative? And I think, again, we feel all that we feel, we identify it, we name it, we share it, and then it's the then what. But in the then what action steps, you can get super creative. And I think that creativity is what opens the door to that, like, moving forward. I really think creativity is a huge step. Have you guys done anything really creative in terms of management? It sounds like you're journaling, which is excellent. Have you guys created anything fun or something different to help you?
Nick, do you want to take it or should I?
Go for it. Just because my service is really bad, I don't want to cut out in the middle.
Okay. No worries. I think everyone's like trying to just like think of like the little things they can do with like their friends. I'm in like ASB right now, so I know that we're also trying to find little things that we can do for the seniors to make the year like better. So I guess everyone's just trying to do like little things, like a little prom, or like what they can do with their friend group to make the year a lot better. So I guess that's the way to take on.
One thing for me, and I know for a lot of people in my like friend group, it's appreciating the little things. So just anything, whether it's, that we have really good weather today, or that, oh, I get to go pick up food from my favorite restaurant tomorrow. Just like things that we normally wouldn't want or think to appreciate in normal life, we take extra time during this time to really put focus on them and appreciate it all.
Agreed.
So I think we're talking about identify your feelings, verbalize them, go to someone that you feel like is a safe person to hold them, then move into the balance of taking action steps and using tools, get creative, be appreciative, look forward, right? So that's how you maneuver through it, one foot after the other, but moving forward.
Agreed. And so for the last question, you mentioned grieving the loss of cherished dreams. And as a senior, as we talked about, I can relate, Nick and I can relate to the feeling of grief from not being able to like be on campus and participate in all of the like traditional senior activities. What advice would you give to students to help cope with the losses brought on from the pandemic?
Oh, man, this is a big one. And obviously, I can only share it from my perspective, right? I don't know what it's like for you guys and how it feels for you. I think that one of the things you can do, again, I think, is get creative. I think creativity is, I have one of the teens that I work with, is an artist, and, not having access to her, tools on campus or her art classes. And so she decided to make a giant coffee table book about her life through quarantine, right? So everything she did, whether it was a delivery person coming, all masked up, or whether it was a walk by herself, looking at the sunset, or whether it was, the Zoom, cast night of watching a movie together, just took photos along every single day of the last year of the pandemic. And she created like this coffee table book and put really funny captions along with these actually very painful, hard photos. So something like that, that's obviously a pretty big, creative kind of intervention, but I really think creativity is the most empowering tool. What can you do? How do you open your mind to possibilities and options, right? Because loss and grief feels very closed, feels very heavy, feels negative and powerless and helpless. So how do we flip that script over to what can I do? And I think that mindset, and, in our house, we, flip the script to what can we do? And, we make, lunches that get dropped off for other families. We, my kids volunteer to help tutor if somebody needs tutoring. There are things you give back, I think, is a great way to help with the loss and grief. Get creative. You want to have a prom, just in case the school doesn't have one? What do you do? How do you make it happen? What does that look like? Get invested. Instead of, oh, this is happening to me, it's kind of like, what can I do? And that's a very different shift. But it's also okay to have days or moments where you're like, oh, this is happening to me. And that's where I really ask parents, don't rush your kid out of that. Let your kid just feel that. And then when they feel a little bit better, then it's like, okay, what can we do? So that cherished dream, I mean, I feel for you guys. But I also know that your generation and your year in particular, to go through that part of junior year, which we all know is, whew, that's quite a year. And then to have all the losses of your senior year and the anticipation of college coming up. I mean, all I can say is a lot of kids that normally were a little bit hesitant to go away to college because they didn't want to leave their home. A lot of my clients now are like, when am I leaving? When's it happening? I'm ready to go. Let's do this. So they've been that positive, right? But I think that it's honor the loss by also embracing opportunity and getting creative.
Yes, I agree. I think getting creative is like the most important thing right now, and thinking of like what you can do to just like make the year just like this much more better.
Thank you, Danielle, for joining us today and giving us such helpful tools for managing grief and loss. Thank you, Michael J. LeBeau, for being our monthly aid sponsor. And thank you, Beverly Hills High School PTSA, as well as Beverly Vista Middle School PTA, for your ongoing support. And a huge thank you to KBEV for producing our show. We hope you make today well lived and stay safe.